Sarah Palin has her first major interview and lives to tell the story.
How did she do?
Better than I would have done, because I would have flunked the Bush Doctrine question. I would have said the Bush Doctrine was either the one Charlie had in mind, which is the right of preemptive war, or the Bush Doctrine is that America's national security depends on the spread of democracy, or the Bush Doctrine is that those nations that harbor terrorists are guilty of terrorism. Take your pick, multiple choice. She picked none of the above, and that's fine with me.
Stupid.
I think Sarah Palin, on the issues, did poorly. I think that she didn't know any of the answers of the Bush Doctrine.
She did fine in the interview, and she was probably helped by the fact that I think the ABC News crew shot the interview in such a way that made my dear friend Charlie look sort of unflatteringly like an old schoolmaster looking down his nose at her.
The interview that I saw and that Americans saw on Thursday and Friday were similar to when I didn't read a book in high school and had to read the Cliff Notes and phone in my report. The tough questions that have been asked of Sarah Palin thus far just have been about the fact that she doesn't know anything and isn't ready to be vice president.
Governor Palin says she's never met a foreign leader. She seems not to have thought a great deal about foreign policy. Why do you think she's ready to be commander-in-chief in a time of war?
She's the governor of the state that supplies 20% of America's oil. I mean, she knows what energy independence is all about.
You know what? It's just beyond, credulity to say, oh yeah, Sarah Palin's ready to be president of the United States of America?
Hold it a second.
Or when she...
They're pretty enthusiastic right now, those Republicans, thanks to Sarah Palin.
4 of the last presidents have been governors, and they have come in, every single one of them, without an in-depth foreign policy experience. But they, like Sarah Palin, read the newspapers.
And that's outrageous.
All right, she's a breath of fresh air. People like her.
Let's be realistic. Let's be honest with each other. Sarah Palin is not somebody who say, oh yeah, she is exactly primed and ready to be president of the United States.
I think what we saw post-Republican convention, I think what we saw is a tectonic shift, and I think that's what's got the Obama campaign concerned, a tectonic shift.
Really?
Yeah, so that you saw
tell our viewers what that word means.
You saw almost a structural change, if you will, not just the typical bump, because you saw major voting blocks start to switch.
Not dramatic. He's gotten independent Republican women back. He hasn't made a dent in Democratic women in any significant way.
A tectonic shift. You agree, Linda?
No, of course I don't agree.
Sarah Palin has taken more in federal earmarks per person than any governor in the history of the planet.
I have some questions here, particularly on the earmark issue, where Sarah Palin, turned down the bridge to nowhere. Well, if you listen to the mayor of Ketchikan, which is one of the points of destination of the bridge, she supported it. She hired a lobbyist as mayor. She hired a lobbyist as governor. She's asked for 200 earmarks for the state of Alaska. I think it's a bit disingenuous, candidly, to get up there and say, I'm opposed to earmarks, I'm going to change it. Alaska per capita gets more in earmarks than California does, by far. And that's a real problem.
Of any state in the United
States. Right. Well, that came from the governor. You've got to ask for it.
Sarah Palin on the issue of earmarks has not walked the walk.
Sarah Palin, as governor, stood up and said, I know earmarks are corrupting. We must ask for less of them.
But she still did
vetoed about, as governor, she did not. As governor, she vetoed about $500 million. As mayor,
she just requested this year, George. She requested hundreds of millions of dollars of earmarks for Alaska. She took the money for the bridge to nowhere. She hired lobbyists to get earmarks. Lobbying for earmarks, received earmarks. Sarah Palin has been an earmark queen in Alaska.
The facts are that Sarah Palin rejected the money for the bridge to nowhere.
Baloney.
It's just not true.
A fundamental mistruth.
You talk about being wrong about something.
In fact, she kept the $223 million in federal taxpayer money for Alaska.
She did keep the money.
Sarah Palin has made significant reforms.
To get the record straight on that, she did not turn back the money to it. There were 2 bridges to nowhere, and one of them, the largest project, and regardless of the merits of the issue, regardless of the merits, she is continuing to support one of the so-called bridges to nowhere, which is across from Anchorage to Point McKenzie. So it's entirely false that she
it's misrepresentation of the record.
The fact is, when she originally represented to the Republican Party that she pulled the plug on the bridge to nowhere, in fact, Congress pulled the plug.
Why John McCain was making fun of DNA earmarks for bears, she was asking for a DNA earmark for seals, almost at the identical moment.
As mayor of Wasilla, she hired a Washington lobbyist and got $27 million in earmarks. And as governor, her administration asked for $453 million in earmarks the last 2 years.
She's a reformer here.
Including $3.2 million to study the genetics of harbor seals and $2 million to study crab productivity.
We're driving those numbers down, working to bring reform to Alaska. This is not something you can just turn the switch on overnight and change. Change takes time, and our reformer is taking that step by step.
The Palin Factor just keeps on rolling.
It's really unbelievable, incredibly jazzed.